Hey parents, I need to talk to you about something that's happening in your house right now. And it's something that most of us completely miss. Your child is communicating with you every single day, but they're not using words. They're using silence. And according to Donald Winnicott, one of the most brilliant minds in child psychology, this silence is trying to tell you something incredibly important about your child's emotional health. Here's what's scary. Most of us think that a quiet child is a good child. We think that when our kids aren't talking much, it means they're being well-behaved, or maybe they're just naturally introverted. But Winnicott discovered that silence in children often means something completely different. It can be a sign that your child is protecting themselves emotionally, and that protection might be necessary because they don't feel safe expressing their true feelings. Today, we're going to dive deep into what your child's silence is really telling you, why it happens, and most importantly, what you can do to create an environment where your child feels safe to share their inner world with you. Because here's the thing that Winnicott understood better than anyone. When children feel they have to hide their true feelings, it doesn't just affect their relationship with you. It affects their entire emotional development. So let's start with the basics. What does silence in children actually mean? Well, it depends on the child and the situation. But Winnicott identified several types of silence that parents should pay attention to. There's protective silence, where your child has learned that expressing certain feelings isn't safe or welcome. There's overwhelmed silence, where your child simply doesn't have the emotional capacity to process what they're feeling. And there's disconnected silence, where your child has started to shut down emotionally as a way of coping with stress or trauma. Let me give you some examples that might sound familiar. Your 8-year-old comes home from school, and when you ask how their day was, they just shrug and say, "Fine." You might think this is normal, but what if your child actually had a really hard day? What if they were excluded from a game at recess, or struggled with a test, or had a conflict with a friend? Why wouldn't they tell you about it? Well, maybe they tried to tell you about difficult days before, and your response was to immediately jump into problem-solving mode. Maybe you started giving advice, or asking a bunch of questions, or worse, you minimized their feelings by saying things like, "I'm sure it wasn't that bad," or "You'll feel better tomorrow." Over time, your child learned that sharing their struggles with you leads to responses that don't actually help them feel better. Or picture this scenario. Your 12-year-old used to be really chatty, always telling you about their friends, their thoughts, their experiences. But lately, they've become more and more quiet. They spend more time in their room, they give shorter answers to your questions, and they just seem more distant. You might think this is just normal teenage behavior, but what if it's actually a sign that your child is struggling with something they don't know how to talk about? Maybe they're dealing with social pressure, or academic stress, or body image issues, or questions about their identity. But somewhere along the way, they got the message that these kinds of struggles aren't something you can help with, or that expressing these feelings would upset you, or that you expect them to handle these things on their own. Here's another example that might hit close to home. Your 6-year-old has started having some behavioral issues. Maybe they're more defiant, or they're having meltdowns, or they're acting out in ways that seem completely out of character. Your first instinct might be to focus on correcting the behavior. But what if the behavior is actually your child's way of communicating something they can't put into words? Winnicott understood that children often express their emotional needs through behavior when they can't express them through words. But if we only focus on stopping the behavior without understanding what it's trying to communicate, we might be missing our child's desperate attempt to tell us something important. So why do children start hiding their feelings through silence? Well, Winnicott identified several reasons, and they're all connected to the child's perception of safety in the relationship with their parents. First, Children might become silent when they feel that their emotions are too much for their parents to handle. Maybe they've seen you get overwhelmed or anxious when they express strong feelings, so they start to believe that their emotions are dangerous or burdensome. They learn to protect you from their feelings, which means they also protect themselves from getting the emotional support they need. Second, children might become silent when they feel that their emotions aren't valid or welcome. Maybe they've been told to stop being so sensitive, or there's no reason to be upset about that, or you're overreacting. Over time, they internalize the message that their feelings don't matter or aren't acceptable, so they stop sharing them. Third, children might become silent when they feel that expressing their emotions leads to unwanted consequences. Maybe when they told you they were scared, you forced them to face their fear before they were ready. Maybe when they told you they were sad, you immediately tried to cheer them up instead of just sitting with them in their sadness. Maybe when they told you they were angry, you punished them for having that feeling. The problem is that when children learn to hide their emotions, they don't just hide them from you. They often start to hide them from themselves too. They learn to disconnect from their inner world, to ignore their feelings, to push down their authentic responses to life. And this, according to Winnicott, is incredibly damaging to their emotional development. Children who learn to hide their feelings often grow up to be adults who struggle with emotional intimacy, who have trouble identifying their own needs, and who have difficulty forming authentic relationships. They become experts at presenting a version of themselves that they think others want to see, but they lose touch with who they really are underneath. Winnicott called this the development of a false self. When children feel that they're authentic, emotions aren't safe or welcome, they create a false version of themselves that seems more acceptable. This false self might be the good kid who never causes problems, or the strong kid who doesn't need help, or the easy kid who doesn't have big feelings. The tragedy is that while this false self might make life easier in the short term, it comes at a huge cost. Children who operate from their false self often struggle with anxiety, depression, and a deep sense of emptiness. They might achieve success in the traditional sense, but they feel disconnected from their own life. So how do you know if your child is hiding their emotions through silence? Here are some things to pay attention to. Has your child become less talkative over time? Do they give you very brief answers when you ask about their day or their feelings? Do they seem to shut down when you try to talk about difficult topics? Do they express their emotions through behavior rather than words? Are they having more meltdowns or being more defiant or seeming more anxious or withdrawn? Do they seem to be working really hard to be good all the time, maybe to the point where it doesn't seem natural? Do they avoid coming to you when they're upset, choosing instead to handle things on their own or to go to friends or other adults? Have they stopped sharing their excitement about things, or their fears, or their hopes and dreams? If you're recognizing some of these patterns, don't panic. The beautiful thing about understanding this is that you can start changing the dynamic right away. And the changes you make are going to have a profound impact on your child's willingness to share their inner world with you. The key is creating what Winnicott called emotional safety. This means your child needs to feel that all of their emotions are welcome, that they won't be judged or criticized for feeling what they feel, and that you can handle whatever they bring to you without falling apart or trying to fix them immediately. So how do you create this kind of emotional safety? First, you need to look at how you typically respond when your child expresses difficult emotions. Do you immediately try to solve their problems? Or do you first just listen and validate their feelings? Do you get anxious or uncomfortable when they're upset? Or can you stay calm and present with them? When your child tells you about something that's bothering them, resist the urge to immediately jump in with solutions or reassurances. Instead, try first reflecting back what you're hearing. You might say something like, "It sounds like you had a really hard day," or "That sounds really frustrating," or "I can see why you'd feel upset about that." The goal is to help your child feel heard and understood before you try to help them feel better. Most of the time, children don't need us to solve their problems for them. They need us to witness their experience and validate their feelings. Second, you need to examine your own comfort level with difficult emotions. If you're someone who gets anxious when your child is upset, or if you feel compelled to make them feel better immediately, your child is going to pick up on that. They're going to learn that their difficult emotions make you uncomfortable, and they might start to protect you by hiding those feelings. It's okay to feel uncomfortable when your child is struggling. That's normal, but it's important that you don't let your discomfort drive your response. Instead, take a deep breath. Remind yourself that difficult emotions are a normal part of life, and focus on being present with your child rather than trying to make the difficult feelings go away. Third, you need to create regular opportunities for emotional connection with your child. This might mean having a daily check-in where you ask not just about their day, but about their feelings. It might mean creating bedtime rituals where you talk about both the good and challenging parts of the day. It might mean taking regular one-on-one time with your child where the focus is just on connecting and being together. The key is to make these conversations feel natural and pressure-free. You're not interrogating your child or trying to force them to share. You're simply creating space for them to express themselves if they want to, and you're demonstrating, through your presence and attention, that their inner world matters to you. Fourth, when your child does share something difficult with you, resist the urge to minimize their feelings or rush to make them feel better. Instead, try to understand their experience from their perspective. Remember that what might seem small to you can feel huge to them, and their feelings are valid regardless of whether you think they should feel that way. You might say things like, "That sounds really hard," or "I can understand why you'd feel that way," or "Thank you for telling me about this." You're acknowledging their experience without trying to change it or fix it right away. Fifth, pay attention to the nonverbal ways your child might be communicating with you. If they're being more defiant or having more meltdowns, instead of just focusing on the behavior, try to understand what they might be trying to tell you through that behavior. Are they overwhelmed? Are they feeling disconnected from you? Are they struggling with something they don't know how to put into words? You might say something like, "I notice you've been having a harder time lately. I'm wondering if there's something on your mind that you'd like to talk about." You're opening the door for them to share without pressuring them or making assumptions about what's going on. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate all silence from your child's life. Some silence is normal and healthy. The goal is to make sure that when your child is silent, it's because they're comfortable and content, not because they're hiding their true feelings out of fear or shame. Winnicott believed that children who feel emotionally safe with their parents develop what he called emotional resilience. They learn that difficult feelings are temporary and manageable, that they can trust their own emotional experiences, and that they can maintain close relationships even when they're struggling. When your child feels safe to share their inner world with you, including the difficult parts, they develop the confidence to be authentic in all their relationships. They learn that they don't have to hide parts of themselves to be loved and accepted. So starting today, I want you to pay attention to your child's silence. Ask yourself what it might be trying to tell you. Create space for your child to share their feelings without judgment or immediate solutions. Show them through your responses that all of their emotions are welcome and that you can handle whatever they bring to you. Remember, you're not just trying to get your child to talk more. You're trying to create a relationship where your child feels safe to be their authentic self, including the parts that are struggling or scared or angry or sad. And that kind of emotional safety is one of the greatest gifts you can give your child. It's the foundation for their emotional health for the rest of their life.